You did not choose this feeling, but it chose you, and it is not going away until you stop pretending it is not there. Something is wrong with the life you built. Not wrong in the way that problems are wrong, fixable, addressable, solvable, with the right strategy and sufficient effort. Wrong in a deeper, more unsettling, more permanent sense. The sense that the entire architecture of your existence, the relationships, the goals, the identity you have been maintaining through sheer force of will and social performance, was built by someone who no longer lives inside you, someone you outgrew so gradually that you barely noticed the departure, someone whose life you are still showing up to, still performing, still organizing your days around, while the real version of you watches from somewhere behind your eyes, increasingly desperate for a life that actually fits. This is not a crisis you created. It is a crisis your soul created on your behalf, because the version of you that built the current life had a ceiling, and you have hit it completely, without warning, without the gradual, navigable transition you would have chosen if the psyche gave anyone a choice in the matter. It does not. And the pressure you feel right now, that unnamed, unlocatable, relentless interior pressure that sleep does not relieve and activity does not resolve, is not anxiety. It is not depression. It is not the sign of something breaking down. It is the sign of something breaking open. The psyche does not transform gradually. It accumulates tension in silence for months, for years, for decades sometimes, and then it moves, suddenly, completely, without consulting the conscious mind that has been managing the surface, while the underground work was being done without its knowledge or permission. You have not been falling apart. You have been being rebuilt. And the rebuilding is about to become impossible to ignore. The moment your carefully constructed life stops working, the moment motivation disappears, relationships become unbearable, goals that once drove you begin to feel meaningless. The mind reaches immediately for the most available explanation. Something is wrong with you. You are broken, depressed, burning out, losing your grip on the discipline and the drive that built everything you have. You should try harder. Recommit to the plan. Get back to the routine. Rebuild the structure that is collapsing and do it faster, with more intention, with the kind of renewed effort that will restore what appears to be slipping away. This explanation is wrong. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally, consequentially, dangerously wrong, because it prescribes the exact opposite of what the situation actually requires. What is happening when your old life stops working is not a failure of your functioning. It is a success of your development, your deeper self, the intelligence that operates beneath conscious awareness, that has been watching you perform a life that increasingly does not match who you actually are, has reached a decision. The decision that the gap between who you have been performing and who you actually are has become too wide to sustain. That the structures you built to contain the old version of yourself can no longer contain what you have become. That it is time, whether you feel ready or not, whether the timing is convenient or not, whether you would have chosen this moment or not, for the old to give way. Here is the first brutal truth. You cannot reinvest energy into structures your inner self has already decided to outgrow. The motivation does not disappear because you have become lazy. It disappears because the deeper intelligence inside you has withdrawn it, deliberately, specifically from the places it no longer serves your genuine development, and redirected it toward what is coming next. The emptiness you feel where the drive used to be is not absence. It is redirection. Your inner world is gathering its resources, pulling back from the perimeter, concentrating its energy at the center in preparation for something that requires everything you have. Here is the second brutal truth. The relationships that are suddenly intolerable were always insufficient. The job that is suddenly suffocating was always too small. The identity that is suddenly collapsing was always a performance rather than a reality. The transformation did not create these problems. It revealed them, made the gap visible that you had been managing into invisibility through the accumulated skill of someone who learned early and thoroughly how to make an insufficient life feel adequate through sheer force of competent performance. The performance is over. Not because you failed at it, because you succeeded at it long enough to reach the point where the next version of your life is demanding to begin. That demand is not comfortable. It was never going to be comfortable. But it is not a catastrophe. It is the most important thing that has ever happened to you. And it is happening now because you are finally ready, even if ready is the last thing you feel. The inner transformation does not begin at the moment you feel it. It begins years before, in the silent accumulation of every moment your instinct was silenced, every compromise that cost you more than you admitted, every performance of a self that kept everyone around you comfortable while slowly starving the authentic version of you that had nowhere to exist within the life you were maintaining. You did not feel it accumulating because you were too occupied managing the surface, but it was accumulating every single day, building press, your alone interior fault lines that were invisible until they were not, until the earthquake arrived and everyone around you, including you, thought it came from nowhere. It did not come from nowhere. It came from everywhere, from the totality of years of living below your actual depth. The signs that the shift has already broken the surface are specific and recognizable, if you are willing to look at them honestly rather than explaining them away. The first sign is the sudden meaninglessness of things that previously defined you. Not sadness about their loss, bewilderment at their absence. The goal achieved that produces emptiness instead of satisfaction. The relationship maintained that suddenly feels like obligation rather than genuine desire. The daily routine that once provided, structure now producing a tedium so acute it borders on physical. You are not depressed about these things. You are strangely, disturbingly detached from them, as though they belong to a life you are watching rather than living. This is your inner world reclaiming the energy it invested in your old structures, not destroying them, withdrawing from them. The meaning did not disappear. It moved to somewhere inside you that the old structures cannot access, to the part of you that knows, with the particular embodied certainty that no amount of rational analysis produced, that something new is coming and is already pulling the resources necessary to build it. The second sign is the complete collapse of your tolerance for inauthenticity, particularly your own. The small social performances that once felt harmless, the slight exaggeration of enthusiasm you do not feel, the agreement with perspectives you do not hold, the careful management of your own genuine reactions to keep the peace, now produce a discomfort so acute and so immediate that sustaining them feels physically impossible. You cannot pretend in the ways you used to pretend, not because you became more principled, because the interior self that was willing to absorb the cost of small dishonesties in service of social smoothness has withdrawn its consent completely, without negotiation. Here is the third sign, the one most people misread as a problem requiring immediate solution, the persistent, sourceless sense that your current life is temporary, that you are in between something rather than fully inside something. That the ground beneath your feet, however solid it looks from the outside, is not the permanent foundation you once believed it was. This feeling is not instability. It is accuracy. You are in between something. The old self is losing its grip. The new self has not yet fully formed, and you are suspended in the disorienting, necessary, entirely real space between them. That space is not empty. It is where everything important about your next life is being assembled. Your only job is to stay present in it long enough for the assembly to complete. 2 responses to inner transformation destroy people. Not the transformation itself. The transformation, however painful its process, moves toward wholeness. The responses to it that interrupt the process before it can complete its necessary work. The first is the grip. the white-knuckled, increasingly frantic insistence on maintaining what is ending. The person who senses the ground shifting and responds by recommitting harder to everything that is dissolving, more effort into the relationship that has already been vacated from the inside, more performance of enthusiasm in the career that has already been abandoned by the deeper self, more investment in the identity that has already been outgrown. Because releasing it means confronting the terrifying, vertiginous, completely necessary experience of not knowing who you are, why the next version is being built. The grip does not prevent the transformation. Nothing prevents the transformation once the inner world has decided it is time. The grip simply concentrates the pressure, turns what could have been a gradual, conscious, navigable process into a sudden, violent, uncontrolled eruption. The harder you hold what is ending, the more devastating the moment you are forced to release it. The second destroyer is the impulsive exit, the person who feels the pressure building and mistakes urgency for readiness, who quits, ends, declares, demolishes, before the inner work that justifies the outer change has been completed, who changes everything around them without changing anything inside them, who discovers, within months of the dramatic exit, that the new job and the new city and the new relationship have reproduced the old patterns with impressive fidelity, because the patterns were never in the circumstances. They were in the person, and the person in their urgency to escape the discomfort of transformation, escape the transformation itself. Here is the brutal truth about both of these responses. They are both forms of fleeing. The grip flees forward into intensified performance. The impulsive exit flees sideways into changed circumstances. Neither of them stays. Neither of them does the one thing that the transformation actually requires, which is presence, complete, uncomfortable, non-managing presence in the reality of what is happening, without fixing it, without fleeing it, without forcing it to resolve on a timeline that your conscious mind finds more manageable than the one your deeper self has determined is necessary. This is the specific courage that this moment requires of you. Not the courage of action, you are good at action. Not the courage of endurance, you have endured more than most people know. The courage of stilling, of sitting inside the not knowing, without immediately converting it into a project. Of feeling the grief of what is ending without letting the grief pull you backward into what you have already outgrown. Of remaining conscious, genuinely, actively, alertly conscious, while the inner world does its work. What emerges from this process is not a repaired version of the old self. It is not the old self with better habits, or clearer goals, or more disciplined execution of the same fundamental orientation. It is something new. A self that no longer organizes its entire existence around other people's comfort with who it is, that can be fully present without being fully managed, that carries both gentleness and fierceness, both compassion and boundary, both openness and discernment, not as performed balance, but as genuine wholeness. A self that looks back at the suffering that produced it and sees, for the first time with complete clarity, that nothing was random. The wounds were specific. The losses were precise. The detours were not mistakes, but the exact route required to reach the place where the real life becomes possible. What felt like destruction was preparation. What felt like loss was clearing. What felt like the end was the most important beginning available to you. So here is what this moment demands. Not strategy, not planning, not the construction of a thoughtful response to the transformation that is already underway and does not require your management. One decision, made today, irrevocably. You stop performing the life that has already ended. Not dramatically, the impulse toward dramatic exits is one of the two things that destroys people in this process, and you now know better. But honestly, quietly, in the specific, concrete, immediately available way of someone who has finally acknowledged to themselves first, where it counts most, that the versi on of their life they have been maintaining through performance no longer has their genuine energy behind it. You know exactly where the performance is happening. You have known for longer than you are comfortable admitting. The relationship where you show up physically while being absent in every way that actually matters. The work where you execute competently while something essential in you goes entirely unengaged. The social world where you participate adequately while feeling, in the particular private, never quite spoken way of someone who has outgrown their container, that none of it is actually yours. Name it, one thing. The most significant place where the performance is consuming the energy your transformation needs to complete itself, and then stop performing it. Not with announcement, not with a dramatic declaration that discharges the energy of change into external chaos rather than allowing it to do its internal work. Simply, quietly, with the full weight of your honest self, finally making contact with your actual reality. Stop pretending the hollow things are full. Stop maintaining the structures that your inner world has already vacated. Stop directing your attention and your energy and the irreplaceable hours of your one life towards sustaining a version of yourself that you have already outgrown. The transformation does not need your direction. The deeper intelligence that initiated this process knows exactly what it is doing and has been doing it far longer than you have been consciously aware of its operation. What it needs, the only thing it needs from you, is your presence, your conscious alert, non-fleeing presence in the reality of what is actually happening. Pay attention to what is dissolving without trying to save it. Feel the grief of what is ending without letting the grief convince you to return to what is already gone. REM. Aim conscious in the disorientation without numbing yourself against it through the frantic activity that keeps the surface busy enough that the depth never has to be visited. The life waiting on the other side of this transformation is not a better version of the life you are leading. It is a fundamentally different one, built not from performance but from genuine alignment. Not from what you were told to want, but from what the deepest, most honest, most fully developed version of yourself actually requires. That life does not begin when the transformation is complete. It begins the moment you stop fighting it. Everything you have been is preparing to become something more real. The only preparation that matters now is the willingness to let it. Stop gripping. Stop fleeing. Stop performing. Be here, completely, for what is already beginning. Your real life is not coming. It is already arriving, in the pressure, in the desire.